The morning briefing room hummed with subdued conversations as 7 junior officers arranged classified folders across the mahogany conference table. Lieutenant Briggs straightened his pressed uniform and checked his watch, noting the Syria operation review would begin in 12 minutes. The Pentagon's third-floor war room maintained its sterile efficiency, wall-mounted monitors displaying satellite feeds from 3 active theaters, while secure communication terminals blinked with encrypted updates. Captain Morrison entered first, followed by Major Chun carrying a thick operational binder. The assembled officers rose simultaneously, chairs scraping against polished floors as morning light filtered through reinforced windows. Morrison nodded his acknowledgement and gestured for everyone to resume their seats, his weathered face showing the strain of coordinating multiple overseas deployments. Briggs opened his Syria tactical assessment when the door opened again. A woman in unmarked fatigues stepped inside, her movements precise and economical as she surveyed the room's occupants. Her uniform bore no visible rank insignia or unit patches, presenting an anomaly that immediately caught Briggs's attention. She possessed an athletic build suggesting extensive physical training, with dark hair pulled back in regulation style and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of their classified environment. The woman moved toward an empty chair along the wall, clearly intending to observe rather than participate directly in their tactical discussion. Morrison and Chun continued their preparation without acknowledging her presence, suggesting they expected her arrival. Lieutenant Kumar glanced questioningly at Briggs, who felt his confusion transforming into suspicion as protocols demanded verification of all personnel accessing classified briefings. Briggs cleared his throat and addressed the woman directly. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I need to see your authorization for this briefing." His tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to enforcing security measures. Though he kept his voice respectful in case she held rank he couldn't immediately identify. The woman looked at him calmly and replied that she belonged there, her voice steady and confident without displaying defensiveness or irritation. Her response struck Briggs as insufficient given the sensitive nature of their Syria operation review, which included classified intelligence on terrorist movements and potential SEAL deployment coordinates. Briggs felt his patience diminishing as security protocols clearly required proper identification from all briefing attendees. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your credentials, or I'll have to ask you to leave," he said more firmly. The other officers watched this exchange with growing discomfort, uncertain whether they should intervene or allow Briggs to handle what appeared to be a legitimate security concern. The woman's expression remained unchanged as she explained quietly that her presence was authorized through appropriate channels. Her calm demeanor only increased Briggs's frustration, as unauthorized personnel often attempted to gain access through confident assertions rather than proper documentation. He had encountered similar situations during his 18-month station at the Pentagon, where ambitious staff members sometimes tried accessing briefings above their clearance levels. Briggs stood from his chair, his frustration crystallizing into anger as the woman's refusal to provide credentials suggested either deliberate insubordination or security breach. "Ma'am, you're disrupting a classified briefing and showing disrespect for established protocols," he declared. His voice carried across the room as other officers shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they were witnessing proper security enforcement or misguided overzealousness. The woman remained seated, her posture relaxed despite Briggs's escalating confrontation. Her apparent indifference to his authority triggered something deeper than professional irritation, touching nerves shaped by months of dealing with civilians who failed to understand military hierarchy and discipline. Without conscious decision, Briggs stepped forward and struck her across the face, the sharp crack echoing through the suddenly silent briefing room. Every conversation ceased as 6 officers witnessed an unprecedented breach of conduct, their shocked faces reflecting the gravity of Briggs's action. The woman absorbed the blow without flinching, her head turning slightly with the impact before returning to face him with unchanged composure. No anger flashed in her eyes, no defensive posture emerged. No verbal retaliation followed. She simply looked at him as though cataloging his behavior for future reference. Kumar audibly gasped while Major Chen rose halfway from his chair, frozen between shock and uncertainty about proper response. Captain Morrison's face darkened with anger, though whether directed at Briggs or the security situation remained unclear. The woman touched her cheek briefly where a red mark was forming, then lowered her hand and asked quietly if he was finished. Briggs felt vindication replacing his anger as her question seemed to confirm his suspicions about unauthorized access. "Definitely not finished, ma'am. You're going to be arrested for infiltrating classified briefings and assaulting a commission officer," he announced. His declaration drew confused looks from other attendees, as no assault against Briggs had occurred, but his adrenaline transformed the confrontation into validation of his security instincts. The woman nodded thoughtfully, as though his threat represented an interesting development rather than serious consequence. Major Chun finally found his voice and demanded an explanation from both parties, his authority asserting control over the deteriorating situation. Captain Morrison reached for the secure telephone while Lieutenant Kumar stared at the woman, recognition beginning to dawn in his expression. Briggs moved toward the communication panel to summon security, confident that proper investigation would reveal the woman's unauthorized presence and justify his actions. The woman watched him initiate the call, her stillness contrasting sharply with the tension radiating from other officers who sensed they had witnessed something far more significant than simple security breach. Security responded within 90 seconds, their rapid arrival confirming the seriousness with which Pentagon personnel treated potential breaches. Sergeant Walsh entered with Corporal Jean, both men scanning the room efficiently before focusing on Briggs for briefing. Walsh's experienced eyes immediately assessed the situation's complexity, noting the mixture of anger, confusion, and concern displayed by the assembled officers. Briggs explained his discovery of unauthorized personnel and the woman's refusal to provide credentials, presenting his narrative with confidence born of certainty about proper protocols. Walsh listened carefully while observing the woman, whose continued composure struck him as unusual for someone facing arrest and potential espionage charges. Jean took notes while studying the room's dynamics, recognizing signs of deeper complexity than simple security violation. The woman remained silent during Briggs's account, offering no defense or explanation that might complicate his straightforward narrative. Her behavior puzzled Walsh, who expected either angry denial or nervous cooperation from individuals caught in security breaches. Instead, she projected calm authority that seemed inconsistent with unauthorized infiltration, creating doubt about the situation's true nature despite clear protocol violations. Security specialist Rodriguez arrived within minutes, his portable scanner and credentials database ready to resolve what appeared to be a straightforward unauthorized access case. Lieutenant Garrett stood beside the conference table, his confidence evident as he prepared to witness formal validation of his security instincts. The woman sat quietly in her chair, hands folded calmly, while Rodriguez approached with professional courtesy rather than the aggressive posture Garrett expected. Rodriguez requested identification from the woman, who produced a military ID card without hesitation or defensive behavior. The card appeared authentic under initial inspection, bearing standard security features and appropriate Department of Defense formatting. Rodriguez inserted it into his scanner and waited for the database response, expecting either invalid credentials or low-level access that would confirm Garrett's suspicions about unauthorized infiltration. The scanner beeped twice and displayed an unexpected message requesting additional authentication protocols. Rodriguez frowned at his screen, then looked more carefully at the ID card's embedded security chip. Commander Elena Vasquez, the card read, though her uniform displayed no visible rank indicators that would support such senior status. Rodriguez ran a secondary scan, initiating deeper database queries that required elevated system access. Garrett watched Rodriguez's expression change from routine confidence to puzzled concentration. "What's the problem, specialist, Garrett demanded, his impatience growing as the simple verification process extended beyond expected time frames. Rodriguez held up a hand requesting patience while his system processed authentication requests through multiple security layers, each requiring higher clearance levels than standard personnel verification. Major Chen entered the briefing room after receiving reports of a security incident requiring command attention. Garrett immediately approached Chun with his version of events, describing how he discovered unauthorized personnel infiltrating their classified Syria briefing and took appropriate action to protect operational security. Chun listened while observing the scene, noting the woman's composed demeanor contrasted sharply with typical reactions from individuals facing serious security violations. Rodriguez completed his authentication sequence and approached Major Chen privately. "Sir, we have an unusual situation," Rodriguez said quietly. "The individual's file requires clearance levels above standard access for complete verification." Chen's eyebrows rose as he processed this information, realizing that unauthorized personnel typically possessed either no credentials or easily disproven false documentation, not files requiring elevated access protocols. Chun turned his attention to Commander Vasquez, whose ID card now displayed authentication confirmations that complicated Garrett's narrative significantly. "Ma'am, I need you to explain your presence in this briefing room and your authority to access classified Syria operational materials," Chen said formally. His tone carried command authority while acknowledging the possibility that Garrett's assessment might be incorrect. Vasquez looked directly at Chun and recited a 12-digit alphanumeric code, followed by 2 additional authentication phrases. Chen recognized the format as operational authorization, typically reserved for special access programs, though the specific codes exceeded his immediate knowledge base. Rodriguez checked his database again and confirmed the codes represented valid authentication for classified program access, though details remained beyond his clearance level. Chun felt his confidence in Garrett's assessment beginning to waver as evidence suggested more complexity than simple unauthorized infiltration. "Specialist Rodriguez, I need you to contact Colonel Patterson immediately and request guidance on handling personnel with elevated clearance authentication," Chen ordered. Rodriguez acknowledged and moved to the secure communication terminal while Garrett's frustration grew at what he perceived as bureaucratic delays in obvious security matter. Garrett interrupted Chen's thoughtful assessment with renewed insistence on his version of events. "Sir, regardless of whatever credentials she's claiming, she disrupted our briefing, refused to identify herself, and behave in a manner completely inconsistent with proper military protocols," Garrett argued. His voice carried conviction born of certainty about his observations, though Chen now questioned whether those observations captured the complete situation. Colonel Patterson answered Rodriguez's call within moments, his tone indicating familiarity with handling complex clearance issues. Rodriguez described the situation carefully, noting Commander Vasquez's elevated authentication requirements and the dispute over her authorization to attend classified briefings. Patterson asked specific questions about the individual's appearance, demeanor, and the precise nature of her authentication codes. Chun watched Patterson's side of the conversation through Rodriguez's increasingly puzzled expressions as the colonel's questions grew more detailed and urgent. Patterson requested confirmation of Vasquez's physical description, then asked whether she had mentioned any specific operational designations or referenced Naval Special Warfare Command. Rodriguez relayed these questions to Chun, who found their specificity troubling given what should have been routine, unauthorized access investigation. Patterson's tone shifted noticeably when Rodriguez confirmed Vasquez's presence in the Syria briefing room. The colonel asked whether anyone had made physical contact with the individual and requested immediate preservation of all security footage from the incident. Rodriguez assured Patterson that complete documentation existed and that no escalation beyond the initial confrontation had occurred, though he carefully avoided mentioning Garrett's assault pending further guidance. Chun received Patterson's instruction to treat the situation as potentially involving personnel with specialized clearance requiring careful handling. The colonel requested a detailed briefing within 30 minutes and emphasized that no additional confrontational actions should occur until proper authentication could be completed through appropriate channels. Chun acknowledged these instructions while noting Garrett's growing agitation at what appeared to be excessive deference toward obvious security violator. Garrett could no longer contain his frustration at the bureaucratic complexity surrounding what he considered straightforward, unauthorized access. "Sir, with respect, we're overthinking this situation," he told Chun. "This individual infiltrated our classified briefing, refused proper identification, and disrupted critical operational planning. I don't care what credentials she claims to have. Her behavior warrants immediate arrest and investigation through proper military justice channels." Chin found himself caught between Garrett's seemingly reasonable security concerns and growing evidence that the situation involved complexities beyond their immediate understanding. Vasquez had remained silent during most of the verification process, her patience suggesting familiarity with security protocols rather than anxiety about impending exposure. Her composed behavior struck Chun as inconsistent with someone attempting unauthorized access to classified information. Rodriguez completed additional database queries that revealed Vasquez's file required Joint Chiefs-level authorization for complete access, information that fundamentally altered his assessment of the situation. He approached Chun with this update, noting that such restrictions typically applied only to personnel involved in the most sensitive special operations or intelligence activities. Chin realized that Garrett's confrontation might have involved individuals whose authorization exceeded their collective ability to verify through standard channels. Vasquez finally spoke directly to Chun, suggesting he contact Admiral Stevens at Naval Special Warfare Command for immediate clarification of her operational status. Her recommendation included specific communication protocols and authentication procedures that demonstrated familiarity with high-level military coordination systems. Chin recognized these procedures as legitimate, though their complexity suggested involvement in operations far above his normal experience. Garrett's anger intensified at what he perceived as the woman's continued manipulation of the verification process through obscure protocols and elevated authentication claims. "This is exactly what infiltrators do, sir," he told Chun. "They use complex procedures and elevated claims to confuse legitimate security responses and buy time for their operations. We need to arrest her immediately before she can compromise additional classified information or coordinate with external contacts." Chun faced a critical decision point as evidence pointed in contradictory directions. Garrett's concerns about infiltration appeared reasonable given standard security protocols, while Vasquez's authentication and elevated clearance requirements suggested legitimate authorization that exceeded their verification capabilities. Patterson's urgent response and specific questions indicated command-level awareness of the situation that transcended routine security incident management. The briefing room atmosphere grew tense as multiple phone conversations initiated to resolve authentication questions that should have been answered within minutes through standard procedures. Vasquez waited patiently while military bureaucracy mobilized around her presence, her calm demeanor contrasting with the urgency displayed by personnel attempting to verify her identity and authorization. Chin realized that regardless of the eventual outcome, Garrett's physical assault on potentially legitimate personnel represented serious misconduct requiring formal investigation and command attention. Colonel Patterson immediately placed a secure call to Admiral Stevens at Naval Special Warfare Command, his voice carrying the urgency that complex clearance situations demanded. The Admiral answered on the second ring, indicating his availability despite the early morning hour and multiple ongoing operational commitments. Patterson described the Pentagon incident carefully, noting the physical confrontation between a junior officer and an individual claiming commander status with elevated authentication requirements. Stevens listened intently as Patterson detailed Commander Vasquez's presence in the classified Syria briefing and the dispute over her authorization. When Patterson mentioned the assault, Stevens's tone shifted to immediate concern, and he requested specific details about the perpetrator's identity and current status. The admiral's reaction suggested personal familiarity with Vasquez rather than routine personnel inquiry, prompting Patterson to realize the situation might involve more significant complications than standard clearance verification. Admiral Stevens terminated the call abruptly and initiated immediate mobilization protocols to the Pentagon, his staff receiving orders for emergency transportation and communication blackout regarding the incident. His rapid response indicated command-level priority that transcended routine administrative matters, suggesting Vasquez held position or operational responsibilities requiring highest-level protection. Stevens's aide noted the admiral's unprecedented urgency and began coordinating secure transportation while maintaining operational security protocols. Meanwhile, security specialist Rodriguez continued his database queries and discovered that accessing Commander Vasquez's complete personnel file required Joint Chiefs of Staff authorization. This revelation fundamentally altered his assessment of the situation, as such restrictions applied exclusively to personnel involved in the most classified special operations or strategic intelligence activities. Rodriguez had encountered similar restrictions only twice during his 8-year Pentagon assignment, both involving individuals whose identities required protection at national security levels. Rodriguez approached Major Chun with this critical information, explaining that standard security protocols were insufficient for complete verification of Vasquez's identity and operational status. Chun absorbed this news with growing concern, recognizing that Lieutenant Garrett's confrontation might have involved someone whose authority exceeded their collective ability to assess or challenge through normal channels. The implications of assaulting such personnel extended far beyond routine disciplinary action into potential courts-martial and career termination. Chun decided to interview the briefing room witnesses individually to establish a complete record of events before higher command arrived to take control of the investigation. Lieutenant Kumar volunteered to provide his account first, his earlier recognition of Vasquez suggesting familiarity that might clarify her legitimate presence. Kumar described observing Vasquez's professional demeanor and noting her tactical awareness of room dynamics, behaviors consistent with experienced military personnel rather than infiltrators or unauthorized individuals. Kumar's testimony included his growing doubt about Garrett's assessment even before the physical confrontation occurred. He had noticed Vasquez's precise movements and situational awareness, characteristics that suggested extensive military training and operational experience. When Garrett escalated verbally, Kumar observed Vasquez's controlled responses and lack of defensive behavior, reactions that seemed inconsistent with someone attempting unauthorized access to classified information. Captain Morrison provided the second witness account, confirming that he had expected Vasquez's arrival and considered her presence routine rather than suspicious. Morrison explained that he had received notification through appropriate channels about observer status for the Syria briefing, though specific identity details were compartmentalized above his clearance level. His testimony directly contradicted Garrett's claims about unauthorized infiltration and established legitimate authorization through proper command channels. Lieutenant Thorne, who had remained silent during the confrontation, described observing Garrett's increasing agitation and his apparent misinterpretation of standard security protocols. Thorne noted that Vasquez had entered the briefing room with confidence, suggesting familiarity with Pentagon procedures rather than nervousness indicating unauthorized access. His account emphasized Garrett's failure to follow proper verification procedures before escalating to physical confrontation. Chun compiled these witness statements and realized they consistently supported Vasquez's legitimacy while raising serious questions about Garrett's judgment and adherence to proper protocols. The testimonies painted a picture of authorized personnel being assaulted by a junior officer who failed to verify his assumptions through appropriate channels. Chin recognized that his initial support for Garrett's actions had been based on incomplete information and standard assumptions about security protocol violations. Rodriguez received additional database information indicating that Commander Vasquez's name appeared on classified personnel rosters for SEAL Team operational assignments. This discovery provided crucial context for her presence in the Syria briefing, as SEAL deployment often required detailed intelligence briefings on tactical situations and threat assessments. Rodriguez shared this information with Chun, who realized that Vasquez's observation of their briefing likely represented legitimate operational preparation rather than unauthorized intelligence gathering. Chun contacted Lieutenant Kumar privately to discuss his earlier recognition of Vasquez and any additional information that might clarify the situation. Kumar admitted that he thought he recognized her from classified personnel briefings, but had been uncertain about approaching someone whose identity might be compartmentalized. His hesitation had prevented him from alerting Garrett to the possibility that his security concerns were misplaced, a failure that Kumar now deeply regretted. Colonel Patterson received confirmation from Admiral Stevens that emergency response was en route and that the incident required immediate escalation to General Morrison's attention. Patterson realized that routine security matter had evolved into command-level crisis, requiring careful handling to prevent additional complications. He began preparing comprehensive briefing materials while ensuring that all personnel involved in the incident remained available for higher command review. General Morrison received Patterson's call in his private office, his schedule clearing automatically when Patterson mentioned the involvement of Naval Special Warfare Command personnel. Morrison's experience with joint operations made him immediately aware of the sensitivity surrounding elite unit personnel and the potential consequences of mishandling such situations. He ordered immediate convening of senior staff while maintaining operational security around the incident details. Rodriguez completed his investigation of security footage and confirmed that video evidence clearly showed Garrett's unprovoked assault on Vasquez during routine briefing attendance. The footage captured Vasquez's calm responses and lack of aggressive behavior, providing objective documentation that contradicted any claims of provocation or defensive action. Rodriguez prepared detailed analysis showing timeline of events and identifying all personnel present during the confrontation. Major Chun discovered additional concerning information while reviewing Lieutenant Garrett's personnel file for the investigation. 3 separate informal complaints have been filed regarding Garrett's inappropriate behavior toward female personnel over the past 18 months, though none had resulted in formal disciplinary action. These complaints described verbal aggression, challenges to authority, and failure to follow proper protocols when dealing with women in military settings. Chun realized that Garrett's assault on Vasquez might represent escalation of existing behavioral pattern rather than isolated incident triggered by legitimate security concerns. The previous complaints had been handled through counseling and administrative actions, but the current situation involved physical violence against potentially high-ranking personnel, requiring formal military justice proceedings regardless of other considerations. Lieutenant Kumar approached Chun privately to express his growing concerns about supporting Garrett's version of events. Kumar explained that his initial loyalty to a fellow junior officer had prevented him from immediately challenging Garrett's actions, but mounting evidence suggested serious misconduct that he could not continue to overlook. Kumar requested guidance on modifying his witness statement to reflect his complete observations rather than selective support for Garrett's perspective. Chun assured Kumar that truthful testimony served everyone's best interests and that loyalty should not extend to covering up potential criminal behavior. Kumar's willingness to provide complete testimony demonstrated the professional integrity expected of military personnel, regardless of personal relationships or unit cohesion concerns. Chun scheduled Kumar for additional interview to capture his full observations without pressure to support predetermined narratives. Admiral Stevens arrived at the Pentagon accompanied by his aide and legal officer, their rapid response indicating the seriousness with which Naval Special Warfare Command treated threats to their personnel. Stevens requested immediate private meeting with General Morrison while his legal officer began reviewing all documentation related to the incident. The admiral's personal involvement suggested that Commander Vasquez held position of significant importance within special operations community. Patterson assembled complete case file, including witness statements, security footage, personnel records, and authentication documentation for presentation to General Morrison and Admiral Stevens. The compiled evidence clearly demonstrated that legitimate military personnel had been assaulted by a junior officer who failed to follow proper verification procedures. Patterson recognized that the incident would require formal military justice proceedings and potentially result in serious consequences for Lieutenant Garrett's military career and civilian future. Admiral Stevens entered General Morrison's private office with classified briefing materials that would fundamentally alter the Pentagon's understanding of the morning's incident. Morrison cleared his schedule and activated security protocols to ensure their conversation remained completely confidential. Stevens placed a thick operational folder on Morrison's desk and explained that Lieutenant Garrett had assaulted one of the military's most elite special operations commanders during what should have been routine briefing observation. Morrison opened the folder to discover Commander Elena Vasquez's complete operational history, including classified mission reports that detailed 15 successful special operations across 4 combat theaters. Stevens explained that Vasquez commanded SEAL Team Alpha, the Navy's most selective unit responsible for highest priority elimination missions and hostage recovery operations. Her personnel file contained commendations from 3 different Secretaries of Defense and personal recognition from the President for operations that remained classified at national security levels. Stevens revealed that Vasquez maintained a confirmed kill count exceeding 40 enemy combatants across her operational career, with 0 casualties among personnel under her command during combat deployments. Morrison absorbed this information while reviewing mission summaries that demonstrated tactical brilliance and leadership capabilities that placed Vasquez among the military's most valuable assets. Her operational success rate approached statistical impossibility, suggesting capabilities that extended far beyond standard special forces training. The admiral explained that Vasquez's presence in the Syria briefing represented legitimate operational preparation for potential SEAL deployment should the situation require elite unit intervention. Naval Special Warfare Command had coordinated her observation through proper channels, though her identity was compartmentalized to protect ongoing operations and maintain security around her specialized assignments. Stevens emphasized that her tactical input could prove crucial if Syria operations escalated beyond conventional force capabilities. Morrison realized that Lieutenant Garrett's assault represented not merely misconduct against fellow personnel, but attack on individual whose loss could compromise national security operations and special forces capabilities. Stevens confirmed that Vasquez's identification and operational status were protected at levels requiring presidential authorization to override, making Garrett's demand for credentials both inappropriate and potentially dangerous to ongoing missions. General Morrison immediately ordered comprehensive review of all personnel involved in the incident, beginning with Lieutenant Garrett's complete military record and extending to everyone present during the briefing room confrontation. Morrison's aide received instructions to coordinate with military justice officials while maintaining strict operational security around Vasquez's identity and mission responsibilities. The general recognized that mishandling this situation could create diplomatic complications and damage relationships with Naval Special Warfare Command. Major Chun received direct orders from Morrison's office to immediately separate Lieutenant Garrett from other personnel pending formal investigation proceedings. Chun understood that this isolation would prevent potential witness intimidation or coordination of testimony, while protecting Garrett from actions he might take that could worsen his situation. Chun also received instructions to preserve all evidence and documentation related to the incident, including personal communications and unofficial discussions among briefing room attendees. Security Specialist Rodriguez compiled a comprehensive timeline documenting every action and statement from Vasquez's arrival through the assault and subsequent investigation. His analysis included precise timestamps, witness positions, and behavioral observations that would support formal proceedings against Garrett. Rodriguez's thorough documentation captured the escalation pattern leading to physical violence and Vasquez's professional responses throughout the confrontation. Lieutenant Kumar privately approached Major Chun to discuss information he had withheld during initial interviews out of misplaced loyalty to Garrett. Kumar explained that he had observed concerning behavioral patterns from Garrett over several months, particularly aggressive interactions with female personnel that suggested underlying issues with authority and military protocol. Kumar's reluctance to report these observations had prevented early intervention that might have prevented the current crisis. Chun encouraged Kumar to provide complete testimony regardless of personal relationships, emphasizing that protecting potential criminal behavior served no legitimate military interest. Kumar agreed to formal interview detailing his observations of Garrett's inappropriate conduct patterns, including verbal aggression toward women officers and challenges to establish chain of command when female personnel held superior positions. Chun realized that Kumar's testimony would establish crucial pattern evidence for any formal proceedings. Colonel Patterson conducted detailed review of Lieutenant Garrett's personnel file and discovered 3 separate informal complaints regarding his behavior toward female military personnel over 18 months. These complaints have been handled through administrative counseling rather than formal disciplinary action, allowing Garrett to continue his assignment without addressing underlying behavioral problems. Patterson recognized that these previous incidents established pattern of escalating misconduct culminating in physical assault. Patterson's investigation revealed that each previous complaint had been minimized or dismissed through informal resolution processes that failed to document the severity of Garrett's conduct. Female personnel had requested transfers rather than pursuing formal complaints, suggesting intimidation or institutional pressure to avoid challenging male colleagues. Patterson realized that systematic failure to address early warning signs had enabled Garrett's escalation to criminal behavior. Admiral Stevens formally requested that General Morrison initiate immediate military justice proceedings against Lieutenant Garrett for assault on superior officer and conduct unbecoming a commissioned officer. Stevens emphasized that Naval Special Warfare Command could not tolerate attacks on their personnel and that failure to pursue maximum penalties would create dangerous precedent regarding protection of special operations personnel. Stevens also requested expedited proceedings to minimize operational disruption to ongoing missions requiring Vasquez's expertise. General Morrison convened Emergency Military Justice Board, including judge advocate general officers, senior investigators, and administrative personnel required for formal courts-martial proceedings. Morrison explained the incident's sensitivity and the need for swift but thorough investigation that would satisfy both military justice requirements and national security considerations. The board received instructions to treat the case with highest priority while maintaining strict confidentiality around operational details. Commander Vasquez was formally debriefed regarding the incident by military investigators who recorded her professional assessment of security protocols and personnel behavior observed during the briefing room confrontation. Vasquez provided tactical evaluation of Pentagon security procedures, noting potential vulnerabilities that unauthorized personnel might exploit and recommendations for improved verification protocols. Her analysis demonstrated the professional competence that had made her invaluable to special operations community. Vasquez's debrief included detailed assessment of Lieutenant Garrett's behavior patterns, decision-making process, and escalation triggers that led to physical assault. Her observations provided psychological profile, suggesting anger management issues, authority problems, and potential gender-based hostility that could compromise future operations if left unaddressed. Vasquez recommended comprehensive evaluation of Garrett's fitness for continued military service regardless of formal justice proceedings outcomes. The Military Justice Board began comprehensive review of Lieutenant Garrett's personnel file, discovering pattern of insubordination and inappropriate conduct that had been inadequately addressed through previous administrative actions. Board members recognized that informal resolution of serious behavioral issues had enabled escalation to criminal conduct that could have been prevented through proper disciplinary intervention. Their review identified systemic failures in personnel management that required institutional reform beyond individual punishment. Investigators interviewed all briefing room witnesses separately to establish independent accounts of the incident, without coordination or influence among testimonies. These interviews revealed consistent narrative supporting Vasquez's legitimacy and documenting Garrett's unprovoked assault through multiple perspectives. Witness testimony eliminated any possible claims of self-defense or justifiable action on Garrett's part while establishing clear timeline of escalating aggression. Legal officers prepared formal charges against Lieutenant Garrett, including assault on superior officer, conduct unbecoming commissioned officer, failure to follow proper protocols, and violation of Pentagon security procedures. These charges carried potential penalties, including dishonorable discharge, imprisonment, and permanent criminal record that would destroy any future military or civilian career opportunities. Legal review confirmed that evidence supported conviction on all charges with minimal possibility of successful defense. Admiral Stevens coordinated with General Morrison to ensure that Commander Vasquez could return to operational duties without compromising ongoing special operations missions. Stevens emphasized that Naval Special Warfare Command needed Vasquez's expertise for imminent deployments, and that prolonged involvement in military justice proceedings could affect national security operations. Morrison assured Stevens that proceedings would be expedited while maintaining proper legal standards. General Morrison personally reviewed all evidence and witness statements to ensure that military justice response adequately addressed the severity of assaulting elite special operations personnel. Morrison recognized that inadequate response would signal institutional tolerance for attacks on the military's most valuable assets, while excessive response might create appearance of special treatment for privileged personnel. Morrison concluded that standard military justice procedures were appropriate given the clear evidence and serious nature of Garrett's misconduct. The investigation expanded to examine Pentagon security protocols and personnel management procedures that have failed to prevent or adequately address Lieutenant Garrett's behavioral problems before they escalated to criminal conduct. Senior staff received orders to review current policies and recommend systemic improvements that would prevent similar incidents through better screening, training, and early intervention programs. Morrison recognized that institutional failures had contributed to creating conditions where assault could occur in secured briefing facilities. The military tribunal convened in Pentagon Conference Room Alpha, with General Morrison presiding over 5 senior officers who would determine Lieutenant Garrett's fate. Colonel Patterson served as military prosecutor, while Captain Singh represented Garrett's defense, though the evidence made successful defense nearly impossible. Morrison opened proceedings by emphasizing the gravity of assaulting fellow military personnel and the need for swift justice to maintain institutional integrity and operational readiness. Lieutenant Garrett entered the hearing room wearing dress uniform stripped of most decorations, his confident demeanor from previous days replaced by growing anxiety as he faced career-ending charges. Major Chun, Lieutenant Kumar, and Security Specialist Rodriguez sat in the witness section, prepared to provide testimony that would establish timeline and pattern of misconduct. Garrett's parents attended from a gallery, their faces showing confusion and disappointment at their son's actions. Admiral Stevens arrived, carrying classified briefing materials that would reveal the full scope of Garrett's misconduct once Commander Vasquez's identity became official record. Morrison acknowledged Stevens's presence and authorized presentation of evidence requiring special clearance levels. The tribunal members received security briefings, enabling them to process classified information about special operations personnel and mission requirements. Captain Singh attempted opening defense by arguing that Lieutenant Garrett had acted appropriately based on reasonable security concerns about unauthorized personnel in classified briefings. Singh emphasized Garrett's duty to protect sensitive information and suggested that any errors resulted from inadequate communication rather than criminal intent. Morrison listened politely while recognizing that subsequent evidence would demolish these arguments completely. The courtroom doors opened and Commander Elena Vasquez entered wearing full dress uniform, displaying decorations that immediately commanded attention from everyone present. Her chest displayed Navy Cross, Silver Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, 3 Bronze Stars with Combat Valor Devices, and Purple Heart with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters. The seal Trident gleamed prominently above ribbon rack that documented combat service spanning multiple theaters and operational assignments requiring highest security clearances. Garrett's face drained of color as he fully comprehended the magnitude of his error for the first time. The woman he had struck wore decorations indicating combat heroism and operational excellence that exceeded most senior officers' entire careers. Her uniform displayed paratrooper wings, explosive ordnance disposal badge, and combat infantryman badge alongside SEAL qualification insignia that marked her as member of military's most elite units. Admiral Stevens stood to present Commander Vasquez's operational history to the tribunal, reading from classified mission reports that documented extraordinary service records spanning 15 years of special operations. Stevens described her leadership of 43 successful missions with 0 casualties among personnel under her command, accomplishment that approached statistical impossibility in special operations environment. Her tactical innovations had been incorporated into SEAL training protocols, and her mission success rate exceeded departmental benchmarks by unprecedented margins. Stevens revealed that Vasquez maintained confirmed elimination count of 41 enemy combatants through precision operations that minimized collateral damage while achieving strategic objectives. Her marksmanship records included several kills exceeding 2,000 meters in adverse weather conditions, demonstrating capabilities that made her invaluable for missions requiring absolute precision. Stevens emphasized that losing Vasquez through injury or misconduct would compromise national security capabilities and operational readiness for elite missions. Morrison asked Vasquez to describe her presence in the Syria briefing room and her reaction to Lieutenant Garrett's confrontation. Vasquez explained that she had been tasked with tactical assessment of potential SEAL deployment scenarios should Syria operations require special forces intervention. Her observation of conventional planning provided crucial intelligence about terrain, enemy capabilities, and extraction requirements that would inform special operations decision-making if deployment became necessary. Vasquez testified that Garrett's initial questioning appeared routine until he escalated without following proper verification procedures. She had provided standard authentication responses expecting professional resolution, but Garrett's agitation suggested emotional rather than procedural motivation for his confrontation. When he struck her, Vasquez recognized behavioral pattern indicating deeper issues requiring institutional intervention beyond simple disciplinary action. Lieutenant Kumar took witness stand to testify about observing Lieutenant Garrett's inappropriate behavior toward female personnel over several months preceding the assault incident. Kumar described Garrett's pattern of challenging women officers, questioning their competence, and creating hostile environment through verbal aggression and subtle intimidation. Kumar admitted his failure to report these behaviors had enabled escalation to physical violence that might have been prevented through early intervention. Kumar's testimony included specific examples of Garrett's misconduct, including inappropriate comments about female officers' qualifications, refusal to follow orders from women superiors, and creating uncomfortable situations during joint assignments. Kumar explained that military culture had discouraged reporting such behavior as personality conflicts rather than recognizing them as serious misconduct requiring formal intervention. His testimony established clear pattern leading to the assault charges. Security specialist Rodriguez presented video evidence captured by Pentagon surveillance systems showing complete timeline of the briefing room incident. The footage clearly demonstrated Vasquez's professional behavior contrasted with Garrett's escalating aggression culminating in unprovoked assault. Rodriguez's analysis eliminated any possibility of self-defense claims, while documenting Vasquez's restraint and Garrett's violation of basic military conduct standards. 3 female officers who had previously endured Lieutenant Garrett's inappropriate behavior provided sworn statements detailing their experiences with his hostility and aggression. Staff Sergeant Williams described Garrett's verbal harassment and attempts to undermine her authority during joint training exercises. Lieutenant Foster testified about Garrett's refusal to follow her orders and his creation of hostile environment that affected unit cohesion and mission effectiveness. Captain Martinez provided the most damaging testimony, describing how Garrett's behavior had forced her to request transfer from promising assignment to escape daily harassment and intimidation. Martinez explained that she had chosen career disruption over formal complaints because institutional response historically protected male officers while punishing women who reported misconduct. Her testimony demonstrated systemic failure to address early warning signs that had enabled Garrett's escalation to criminal behavior. Morrison asked the tribunal to consider evidence demonstrating that Lieutenant Garrett's assault represented culmination of long-standing behavioral problems rather than isolated incident triggered by legitimate security concerns. The pattern evidence showed deliberate misconduct toward female personnel combined with failure to follow proper protocols and inability to manage emotional responses in professional situations. Morrison emphasized that such behavior posed ongoing threat to unit cohesion and operational effectiveness. Defense counsel Captain Singh attempted to argue that Lieutenant Garrett's actions resulted from zealous devotion to security protocols rather than criminal intent, noting his exemplary performance in other military duties. Singh suggested administrative punishment rather than criminal prosecution, arguing that destroying Garrett's career would waste military investment in his training and education. Morrison recognized this argument's weakness given the severity of assaulting superior officer and pattern of previous misconduct. Admiral Stevens addressed the tribunal to emphasize broader implications of inadequate response to attacks on special operations personnel. Stevens explained that elite units required absolute protection to maintain operational effectiveness and recruitment of qualified personnel. Failure to prosecute assault charges fully would signal institutional tolerance for misconduct against the military's most valuable assets, while potentially compromising future special operations capabilities. The tribunal deliberated for 37 minutes before returning unanimous verdict finding Lieutenant Garrett guilty on all charges, including assault on superior officer, conduct unbecoming commissioned officer, and violation of established protocols. Morrison announced that Garrett's commission was immediately terminated with recommendation for dishonorable discharge and military prison sentence reflecting gravity of his misconduct and pattern of inappropriate behavior toward fellow personnel. Commander Vasquez addressed the tribunal following the conviction, emphasizing that institutional response mattered more than personal offense in determining whether similar incidents would recur. Vasquez requested that punishment focus on preventing future misconduct rather than retribution, noting that military effectiveness depended on trust and professional behavior among all personnel regardless of gender or specialization. Her gracious response impressed tribunal members while reinforcing her exceptional character and leadership capabilities. General Morrison formally apologized to Commander Vasquez on behalf of the Pentagon and entire military establishment for institutional failure to prevent assault on distinguished special operations personnel. Morrison acknowledged that systemic problems had enabled Lieutenant Garrett's misconduct to escalate unchecked and promised comprehensive reform to protect all military personnel from similar attacks. Morrison emphasized that Vasquez's service record exemplified military excellence, while Garrett's behavior represented complete antithesis of military values. Pentagon leadership implemented comprehensive policy changes within 48 hours of Lieutenant Garrett's conviction, beginning with mandatory clearance verification protocols that required database confirmation before challenging any personnel's authorization to access classified briefings. General Morrison signed directive establishing clear procedures for security concerns that prevented junior officers from confronting individuals without proper authentication through designated channels. These protocols eliminated subjective interpretation while protecting legitimate personnel from harassment or assault. Major Chun received formal commendation for his thorough investigation and professional handling of complex situations involving special operations personnel. Morrison recognized Chin's ability to adapt his initial assessment when evidence contradicted assumptions, demonstrating intellectual honesty and investigative competence essential for command positions. Chin's promotion to lieutenant colonel came with assignment to Pentagon Security Review Board, where his experience would prevent similar incidents through improved training and oversight. Security Specialist Rodriguez earned advancement to Senior Security Specialist along with responsibility for training new personnel in proper clearance verification procedures. Rodriguez's meticulous documentation and professional behavior during crisis demonstrated competence that justified expanded authority and specialized assignment. His training protocols emphasized thorough authentication over aggressive confrontation, creating institutional culture that protected legitimate personnel while maintaining security effectiveness. Lieutenant Kumar received assignment as special liaison for reporting inappropriate conduct incidents, his testimony having demonstrated courage to overcome misplaced loyalty when confronting serious misconduct. Kumar's new role involved confidential consultation with personnel experiencing harassment or discrimination, providing safe reporting mechanisms that bypassed potential institutional bias or retaliation. His transformation from reluctant witness to institutional reformer illustrated personal growth through moral clarity under pressure. Former Lieutenant Garrett faced immediate implementation of his dishonorable discharge following unsuccessful appeal of tribunal decision. Military prison sentence of 18 months reflected severity of assaulting superior officer combined with pattern of misconduct toward female personnel. Garrett's civilian employment prospects vanished as background checks revealed criminal conviction and dishonorable discharge, effectively destroying future career opportunities in law enforcement, government service, or corporate security positions requiring trustworthiness. Garrett's military benefits termination included loss of educational assistance, healthcare coverage, and veteran preference for government employment. His parents mortgaged their home to cover legal expenses for failed appeal attempts, while Garrett faced financial ruin and social isolation in civilian community. 3 years later, Garrett worked intermittent manual labor jobs while struggling with depression and substance abuse problems that stemmed from his spectacular career destruction and public humiliation. 3 female officers who had endured Garrett's previous harassment received formal apologies from Pentagon leadership, along with career advancement opportunities to compensate for transfers and assignments disrupted by his misconduct. Staff Sergeant Williams earned promotion to Master Sergeant with choice assignment to Elite Training Command. Lieutenant Foster received accelerated promotion track, while Captain Martinez returned to her preferred specialty with command position that restored her interrupted career trajectory. Commander Vasquez completed successful return to SEAL Team Alpha Command within 2 weeks of tribunal conclusion, her tactical input having proved crucial for Syria operation planning that proceeded under her strategic guidance. Naval Special Warfare Command implemented enhanced anonymity protocols for elite operators attending joint briefings, protecting their identities while enabling essential coordination between conventional and special operations forces. Vasquez's experience led to systematic security improvements that benefited entire special operations community. Admiral Stevens established new Pentagon protocols requiring coordination with appropriate service commands before questioning personnel with specialized clearances, preventing junior officers from confronting individuals whose identities required protection at operational security levels. Stevens's advocacy ensured that special operations personnel received institutional protection commensurate with their national security value and mission criticality. These protocols became model for similar policies across all military installations worldwide. General Morrison created Pentagon Review Board, specifically tasked with investigating unreported misconduct cases and identifying institutional factors that enabled harassment or discrimination to persist without formal intervention. The board's initial investigation revealed dozen cases where informal resolution had protected perpetrators while forcing victims to accept transfers or career changes to escape hostile environments. Morrison's reforms eliminated informal resolution options for serious misconduct while strengthening support systems for reporting personnel. Pentagon culture transformation became measurable within 6 months through anonymous surveys, showing increased confidence in reporting mechanisms and decreased tolerance for inappropriate behavior toward female personnel. Training programs emphasized respect and professionalism while eliminating cultural attitudes that had historically protected male officers from accountability for misconduct. Senior leadership demonstrated commitment to change through personal involvement in investigation and prosecution of harassment cases. Commander Vasquez led successful Syria operation 2 months later, utilizing tactical intelligence gathered during the controversial briefing to coordinate precision strikes that eliminated high-value targets while minimizing civilian casualties. Her mission's success vindicated Naval Special Warfare Command's decision to provide observer access to conventional planning while demonstrating value of inter-service coordination for complex operations. The mission's flawless execution enhanced Vasquez's reputation and validated institutional changes that protected special operations personnel. 6 months after the tribunal, Pentagon misconduct reports decreased by 63%, while resolution of legitimate complaints improved through streamlined investigation procedures and stronger accountability measures. Female officer retention rates improved significantly as institutional culture shifted toward professional respect and equal treatment regardless of gender or specialization. Morrison's reforms created sustainable change that transcended individual cases through systematic prevention rather than reactive punishment. The War Room incident became case study for military justice training programs throughout Department of Defense, illustrating consequences of failing to follow proper protocols while highlighting importance of treating all personnel with professional respect. Training scenarios based on Garrett's misconduct taught identification of escalating harassment patterns and appropriate intervention techniques for preventing violence. Educational programs emphasized that security concerns never justified assault or harassment of fellow military personnel. Commander Vasquez's exceptional service record gained additional distinction through Medal of Honor recommendation for subsequent classified operation that saved 12 hostages from terrorist compound in undisclosed location. Her tactical brilliance and leadership under extreme pressure demonstrated capabilities that made her invaluable national security asset. The successful rescue mission occurred 18 months after the Pentagon incident, proving that institutional reforms had preserved elite capabilities while improving professional environment. Lieutenant Colonel Chun implemented Pentagon-wide training programs emphasizing professional investigation techniques and proper evidence evaluation before reaching conclusions about personnel misconduct or security violations. Chin's curriculum included recognition of behavioral patterns indicating harassment or discrimination alongside technical skills for authentication and clearance verification. His training reduced false accusations while improving identification and prosecution of legitimate misconduct cases. 3 years after implementation, Pentagon leadership reviewed institutional changes and found sustained improvement in personnel relations, misconduct reporting, and resolution of legitimate complaints through proper channels. Anonymous surveys indicated increased confidence in leadership and stronger commitment to military values among personnel at all levels. The cultural transformation initiated by Vasquez's assault had created lasting positive change that enhanced organizational effectiveness and personnel satisfaction. General Morrison's final report to Joint Chiefs documented successful institutional reform following serious misconduct incident, emphasizing prevention through training, accountability through investigation, and protection of all personnel regardless of specialization or gender. Morrison's leadership during crisis became model for addressing systemic problems through comprehensive policy changes rather than individual punishment alone. The Pentagon's transformation demonstrated institutional capability for meaningful reform when leadership demonstrated commitment to change. Former Lieutenant Garrett Story served as cautionary tale throughout military education programs, illustrating how personal prejudices and failure to follow proper protocols could destroy promising careers while damaging institutional integrity. His case demonstrated zero tolerance for assault, while emphasizing that military service required highest standards of professional conduct and respect for fellow personnel. Educational programs used as example to reinforce values, training, and behavioral expectations for commissioned officers. Commander Vasquez continued leading special operations missions while her experience contributed to policy improvements that protected elite personnel throughout Department of Defense. Her professional response to assault and gracious testimony during tribunal proceedings exemplified military leadership and personal character that inspired institutional culture change. 5 years later, Vasquez's influence extended throughout special operations community through training programs and leadership development initiatives that emphasized professionalism and mutual respect among all military personnel.